June 2008, we were told that there was some possibility of flooding. And so every day the estimate changed and we would get more information. And at one point, people were saying, look what they're talking about. They're talking about the water being, like this high on the outside of the building. That's just not going to happen.
I was actually on a statewide tour with a dance company, rubber band dance group from Montreal. I kept on getting calls from the staff, and they were talking about the impending flood. And they kept on saying Hampshire's going to be closed down, and I just didn't believe them. I couldn't believe it. So we drove down. It was, I think, about June 12th, and the rains were so. I've never driven in such heavy rain. I just knew that what I'd been hearing was probably true. So by the time we got down here the next day, June 13th, the padlocks were on the doors of Hampshire.
At first it was more just sort of anecdotal and personal, chatting about the weather as we often do. And then as the evolution of that flood continued, we started paying much more careful sort of engineering and scientific attention to it. Like, hey, this is real, and we got to start thinking about what this impact might be to campus.
So in fact, in the early days, we were turning away volunteers. We didn't need them. It was a rather modest plan. In fact, the 100-year flood plan only calls for us building, the highest wall we built is only 2 feet high. We ended up building 9 feet high in the end.
That Thursday night, after the decision to evacuate was made, we had a very intense rainfall, about 8.5 inches of rain at its peak, just outside of Cedar Rapids. Probably more in the 6-inch rain fall total or so around Iowa City. But it just literally was a downpour all through the night.
But it was all that concentrated rain, about 3 inches coming down into this valley, that was the straw that broke the camel's back. And I came out in the early dawn with the utilities director, Glenn Mowry, and we looked up and down the river, and it was starting to come over the sandbag walls. And then within a few hours, we were flooded.
We got to go into the building. We had to wear boots, we had to wear gloves, and I was shocked to see the damage that a flood can do. We had water about 18 inches. We could see it. It had receded some, but we could see on the walls on the stage. We had water all the way back to the dressing rooms in the backstage area. We had water up to row O in the theater.
It was more than a month before we were able to even get into theater building because there were 13 feet of water in the basement. And every time they would pump it out, the hydrostatic pressure would just push it all right back in. We couldn't get it to stay out of there. Voxman we got into a little bit sooner, and it was just terrible. Just the wreckage of not just the building, but some of the things that we couldn't take, like the organs. All the organs were on the first floor, and they were all sitting in water up to the bench tops. And we got a new organ professor that summer. He gets here, and we're like, welcome. You have no organs,
The national media that was covering us was something that none of us were prepared for. We had every major news organization here. We had the AP, we had the major networks, we had Fox Business, we had the Weather Channel, we had NPR. They were all here. And every day we would be in front of a noon press briefing to national media, which could be intimidating if you're not trained for that.
People who'd spent a lot of time in Voxman Music Building and the old Hampshire felt very emotional about leaving there. There were people who spent their whole careers there. We also had faculty members who lost their homes and their offices. I felt terrible for them because it's like you have nothing. You've lost everything. And sorry. I really admired them because a couple of them, they just were so resilient. They bounced right back. And I thought, oh my gosh, if that were me, how would I feel? All I got was water in my basement and, lost my office. But it's like, yeah, well, you can get another office. But losing your house entirely, that's just really hard. We had a mandate from the president basically President Mason said, we're starting school here in August. Let's make that happen. So we did. We basically said, we've got to make all these classes run. We're not going to let any students down. We're not going to tell people we're canceling anything, and we didn't.
We got word, I'll never forget the meeting in Jessup Hall. This was, I think it was February of 2009 with Doug True, that Hancher, the School of Music, the School of Art and Art History, we all were going to be able to have a new building. And the reason why is our buildings were damaged greater than 50% of the value of the building. So, what excitement, how elated were we? And, a little scary, a lot of uncertainty, but at the same time, what an opportunity lied ahead for all of us.
I feel kind of both privileged and also I have to pause a little bit because I've been around so long, that I've seen and experienced and managed, multiple of these historic floods. So I was here in 1993. We saw the 2008 event. We've seen many events across Iowa and the Midwest since then. And so there's evidence, scientific evidence, let's say data, that suggests that we're seeing a greater frequency of flooding. Maybe not bigger in magnitude. We've always had these historically large floods, but we're seeing them happen more often. And there's no other attribution to that other than changing climate.
It was tough. It was certainly challenging, but I'll tell you, it was a journey that I really, to this day, I'm just so grateful that I had that opportunity to experience. Mm-hmm. Who would have guessed back in 2008? We just didn't know what. And sometimes, there is a time when uncertainty ends up turning into some really great opportunities, and it did for us, for sure. But it was, at the beginning, it was pretty sad, but it didn't take me long to really kind of look ahead.
Of course, we lost the battle, and that's regrettable. And you could always say, well, if we'd only waited out the storm and worked over the midnight and all this, there's always these things that you wonder, what if we did? But it was Mother Nature's battle. She won it. It was her storm that pushed us over the edge.